Hey guys, how's it going? This is the Power Gunner, and finally, this is my review of Infamous Second Son. Infamous Second Son is made by Sucker Punch and is the third installment in the Infamous series. If you don't watch my videos, then I'm just going to give you some background information on my history with the Infamous series. In my opinion, Infamous 1 is the best game I've ever played. I love that game to death, and I was disappointed by Infamous 2, but I still really liked it. Second Son isn't Infamous 3. It's pretty much separated from the rest of the series as its own game. Second Son takes place 7 years after Infamous 2, and you don't need to play the first two games to play Second Son. Okay, and just a quick note to anybody from Sucker Punch, if they are watching this, I'm just going to say, right now, I am going to say some bad things about the game, and none of that is meant to be offensive in any way. It's just meant to show what I felt was well done in the game and what I felt wasn't done well in the game, and tips of how you can improve your future games. Sucker Punch people who are watching, which most likely is Billy Harper and Jason Connell, because they said they would watch it on Twitter. So how this review will work, I am going to be very honest. In the first part, it's just going to be the basic review with no spoilers and just my basic thoughts on how good the game was. The second part will be me talking about spoiler type things in the game and what I thought of them, just for people who have played the game so that they can know my thoughts on that. So, Infamous Second Son. I was very excited for this game and was looking forward to it a lot. I even thought that it would be my new favorite game of all time, so let's see if it lived up to those very high expectations. Here are some things to know. Conduits are people in the Infamous universe who are able to get superpowers. And the Department of Unified Protection is a government agency that tracks down conduits and locks them away. Second Son is about a punk 24-year-old graffiti artist beanie-wearing Native American guy, Delson Rowe, who ends up getting superpowers. A military transport, which is carrying conduits, crashes in Delson's Indian reservation hometown, which is outside of Seattle. Delson discovers that his power is to absorb other conduits' powers when he shakes their hand. Brooke Augustine, the DUP's leader, comes to catch the escaped conduits. It turns out she is a conduit too with concrete powers. She ends up putting concrete in the legs of Delson's tribe members, including Betty, a sweet old lady who is kinda like Delson's grandma but isn't actually his grandma. Augustine goes back to Seattle and the DUP take over the city. Delson comes up with a plan to absorb her power to heal the tribe. Delson goes to Seattle with his brother Reggie, who is a cop, to catch Augustine and get the other escaped conduits' powers. I like how when Delson first gets Smoke, which is the first power, he's freaking out and he can't control it. That was something cool to see that we didn't see too much of in Infamous 1. Smoke, obviously, isn't going to be the only power that Delson gets. All of the powers in the game are generally new and original to the superhero genre. Each power Delson gets has similar controls and structure. Each has a dash move, shooting, throwing grenades, firing rockets, hover, doing melee attacks, and karmic streaks, which I'll explain later. The controls for the game are very good, and you can easily switch between powers simply by draining the desired one. The gameplay is interesting and challenging enough. You fight a variety of DUP officers throughout the game, many of them using their own concrete powers in different ways. Unfortunately, the occasional boss fights feel very unoriginal, and you just have to repeat the same actions over and over. In the past games, when Cole fell in water, he died because of his electricity power. Water doesn't damage Delson, but if you fall into water deep enough, then the game won't let you swim and makes you touch the touchpad to return to the shore. Speaking of the touchpad, it felt like most of the time it felt good and natural to use it, but other times, like when you're draining a power, it felt like you're just pressing a big button. One thing that is true about the other Infamous games is they are full of glitches. Second Son has some glitches, but thankfully has a lot less than in past games. Okay, so Karma. Karma is a morality system in the Infamous games. You make choices in the story and gameplay that make you good or evil. Delson's appearance and the color of his powers change based on karma. I'm actually surprised that they are still using this system. It's very black and white. It's clear what choice is the good choice and what choice is evil. The main problem with the karma system is that you pretty much make one choice to be a good guy or a bad guy at the start of the game. You have to keep on making the same kind of choices to get new upgrades and to keep your old ones. The game can punish you for making choices you want to make. There are only 5 choices in the game. Infamous 1 had a lot more, and by the way, I am going to be making a lot of comparisons. to Infamous 1. Infamous 1 also had you make a lot of choices by doing an action in the game, not just pressing L2 or R2 like in Second Son. Story choices don't really change anything except for the ending, and it doesn't feel like your choices matter. Karma has a much more significant impact in gameplay. You basically execute or subdue enemies, and there are other things that you can do, such as killing street musicians or destroying drugs. It seems like there are more evil activities to do, which overall I think that evil is better in the game, but we'll get to that later. So, karma streaks. When you're good, you fill up a bomb-shaped meter by doing good deeds, and when it fills up, you can unleash a very powerful move. If you do something evil, you lose your karma streak. This can get extremely annoying when you accidentally kill someone while fighting the DUP. When you're evil, you have to do 7 evil things, and it's timed. You will lose the streak if you run out of time or die. The streaks themselves are destructive and look awesome, but you'll end up seeing these animations over and over, and it gets boring to have to sit through it. In Infamous 1, you can control the lightning storm, so you are still playing the game, not watching an animation while waiting to play again. A big difference with the powers in this game is faster mobility. With smoke, you can dash into vents and shoot up into the air. With neon, you can run super fast on the ground and up walls. Delson can still climb like Cole could, but it's a lot less reliable and unnecessary because of his fast-moving superpowers. The mobility feels awesome, but it also makes the map feel small. I wish that Sucker Punch's version of Seattle was bigger, but it's a great playground for using your superpowers. It's not a replica of the real Seattle, but it has a lot of familiar landmarks such as the monorail train, the Crocodile restaurant, and of course the Space Needle. Unfortunately, you can't climb to the top of the Space Needle other than in one of the missions. I assume this is because Space Needle LLC doesn't want players jumping off of their structure. I also think that's why you won't get hurt if you get hit by the train. Doing that sort of stuff just kinda takes the fun out of the game. It's a video game, so I just kinda think you should let us have our fun and do those sort of things. I would have rather had a fake version of Seattle and be able to jump off of the Space Needle than have the real Seattle and not being able to jump off of the real Space Needle. Second Son is the first Infamous game to feature a real city. Sucker Punch is located near Seattle, so they wanted to make their city in the game. It can take the fun out of the game, but it does feel very Seattle-like. It rains a lot and pedestrians drink a lot of coffee. But the city doesn't feel alive like Empire City did, and they still haven't changed the bad pedestrian AI. They just walk around and get scared if you use your powers. Pedestrians who are in cars can't get out, and walking pedestrians can't get in cars. Destroying cars, and even killing people who are in cars, isn't evil in the game. The other day I was destroying inhabited cars with good karma, and people around me were cheering for me. Although most of the bad AI is also true in Infamous 1, the pedestrians say things and do things that make Empire City seem alive. Nothing like that is seen or heard from Seattle's pedestrians in Infamous Second Son. And because the people feel lifeless, killing them doesn't feel that bad. They're usually annoying and in your way, and this is another reason why I think it's better to be evil in Infamous Second Son. Anyways, this game is absolutely beautiful. Each time of day makes Seattle look different, and each power looks awesome. In cutscenes, you really get good facial expressions from the mocap technology. You can tell that the main focus in Second Son was having really good and pretty graphics. And if Jason Connell is watching this, I want to tell you that you did an amazing job with the graphics in the game, but it doesn't seem necessary for this game to need to have graphics that look that good. It's nice to look at, but once you get used to it, it doesn't really matter. I'm glad that the powers look awesome, but graphics shouldn't have been the main focus for this game. The main reasons I fell in love with Infamous 1 were the mysterious story, the atmospheric feeling of Empire City, electric superpowers that fit in perfectly with that city, and Zeke, of course. Notice that I didn't mention good graphics. Other than doing story missions in Second Son, you do things to clear the DUP out of the city. These aren't really side missions like in the past Infamous games, and the only real side missions are the Cole's Legacy DLC and Paper Trail missions. Cole's Legacy is the DLC that people got if they got the limited or the collector's edition of the game. I got the collector's edition, so I have this DLC. It's supposed to help connect Second Son to Infamous 2. It contains 4 missions that Raymond Wolf sends you on. Raymond is the brother of Dr. Wolf from Infamous 2, which, that's kind of interesting. Also, Zeke is in it! Yay! Zeke is my favorite Infamous character, and I like that he had a cameo in it, but he's hardly in it. And when you finish the DLC, you get to wear Cole's jacket. Cole's Legacy doesn't actually connect the games that much. Also, Raymond Wolf's skin is just one of the pedestrian skins. I thought this was weird seeing him around the game when that wasn't actually him, and that just seems lazy. Paper Trail is kinda interesting. You go on a website to activate the missions by doing detective stuff. You chase down a paper conduit and ultimately don't get her power. It's kinda interesting, but I don't like having to go on my PC to play more of the game. There are various things you can do around Seattle to clear out the DUP. Each district has the same activities. First you take out the mobile command center. Sometimes there are jammers that block out parts of your minimap, so you have to take those out. You can destroy DUP cameras and do spray paint stencil art, which is actually pretty interesting and fun. They usually have some sort of comedy in them. You move the controller to aim the spray paint can and make some cool little art. The DUP also has secret agents who look like normal people. You find them in a crowd and chase them down. There is an informant in the DUP who has hidden audio logs to find. They have kind of interesting info about the DUP, but I don't like that you can't play them back again like you could with dead drops in the past games. The DUP uses blast shards to power drones, conduit detecting hand scanners, and mobile command centers. It feels like blast shards are forced into the game though. Blast shards and core relays, which Delson gets some powers from, are never really explained that much. Delson somehow knows to drain the first core relay without even knowing what it is. In Second Son, blast shards are used as a currency to upgrade your powers. The upgrade system is a big improvement from the past games, not that Infamous 1's upgrade system was bad. Each power has an upgrade tree. Some upgrades are only for good and some are only for evil. This is the main thing that changes gameplay when you go back and play the game with the opposite karma. District showdowns can be done once the DUP control in the district has dropped below 30%. Delson prank calls the DUP and vandalizes one of their billboards. The showdown is a challenging fight against the DUP, and once you defeat the enemies, you will get a new vest design. These activities to clear out the DUP are extremely repetitive, but still pretty fun most of the time, and I still would have liked more variety though. Now let's go back to talking about the story. There is really good acting and presentation in the cutscenes of Infamous Second Son. So for the characters, Delson is a pretty funny character, and I enjoyed most of his humor. When starting Second Son, Delson has more of a character than Cole did when starting Infamous 1. Because of the personality given to Delson, it makes more sense that he would make more evil choices. I think it was a good idea to not give too much of a personality at the start of Infamous 1, because it felt like you were Cole and you were choosing those choices that made sense to you, not for the character you played as. I'm going to use the first choice in Second Son as an example. It makes sense that Delson wouldn't turn himself into Augustine based on his character established so far. When you make the good choice to turn yourself in, the same thing happens that happens on Evil. Augustine puts concrete in the tribe's legs. When you make the evil choice, it feels like you caused it, and I love the conversation afterward with Betty. Also, shortly after, Delson threatens to break down a door of a bus, whether you are good or evil, which of course makes more sense to do if you're evil. Reggie can be funny, but he's usually telling Delson to not do stuff and being grumpy about his brother having superpowers. Betty is a really cool character. She sometimes calls Delson, but is barely in the game, when yet she's pretty much the main focus of the plot. Augustine is a menacing main villain, and cutscenes with her feel really tense. And just like Betty, I wish she was in the game more. This can be said for pretty much every character except Delson and Reggie. The game feels short, it has bad pacing and seems to go by way too quickly. If you only play the story missions, then the game will be about 8 hours long. And it'll be about 20 hours long if you're going for 100% completion. That just isn't long enough for an open world game or to develop characters and have a complex story. Infamous 1 was about 15 hours long for only doing story missions, and about 35 hours long for a completionist like me. In Second Son, the story is simple and to the point. It doesn't really have any twists until the end, and most of the story is very predictable. In Infamous 1, the story was constantly throwing you crazy twists and forming strong, complex characters, unlike Second Son. There are two endings in Second Son, one for each karma. Without spoiling them, one of the endings is predictable and boring, and the other ending is unexpected and interesting. I'll talk about the endings in the spoiler section of the review, of course. The game also leaves many questions unanswered. How did the RFI from Infamous 2 not kill all conduits? Why don't conduits need to be activated anymore? What exactly is a prime conduit? The game can become confusing at times. Overall, the story has great acting, but isn't very interesting or long enough. It's a game about removing rocks from an old lady's legs. And yes, I stole that line from IGN. As far as replayability goes, it's fun to go back and play the game with the opposite karma, but all that changes is Delson's appearance, a slightly different way of using the same powers, a few missions, a few cutscenes, and the ending. About 1 month after getting the game, I was bored to death whenever I played it. I got the Platinum Trophy for Second Son, just like I did with the other Infamous games, and Second Son's Platinum Trophy is one of the easiest platinum trophies I've ever gotten. This is good in a way, just to have something that isn't extremely hard, and 10% of the game's community can get it. However, I feel like if the game had more trophies to get, it would have been a lot more fun. Another thing that I haven't mentioned is this game has a great soundtrack. It's mostly grunge music that fits well with the city and with Delsin. The first time I played the third boss fight in Second Son, I said, "This isn't Infamous anymore," and I didn't know how true I was. In fact, it feels like Second Son and Infamous 1 were possibly made by different developers, although they weren't. It seems like each Infamous game distances itself more and more from that game that I absolutely love, and crushes my hopes for the future of the series. So, should you buy Infamous Second Son? If you haven't played the past games and want a new PS4 game with pretty graphics and fun superpowers, then sure. But if you're a fan of the Infamous games, specifically Infamous 1, then you'll probably be as disappointed as I was. Also, I think Infamous Second Son is the worst Infamous game made so far. The series has gone from a masterpiece to just being mediocre. So this is the end of the spoiler-free section of the review. I hope this review was helpful, and to the people who haven't played this game, have a great day. And for the rest of the people, the rest of the review, we'll talk about spoilers in the game, so if you haven't played Infamous Second Son yet, then you should stop watching the video right now. I'll give you a few seconds to click off. Okay, so here's my thoughts on some of the spoilers type things in the game. Delsin's power to absorb powers isn't really shown much because you only get 4 powers, which seems weird because that's his actual power. Before the game was out, I was hoping for at least 6 powers, but the actual game is nowhere near long enough to have that many powers. My favorite power would have to be video. I love turning invisible, hovering over long distances, and video sword and claws depending on if you're good and evil. Getting concrete at the end of the game makes sense with the story, but doesn't really leave you with many story missions to use it. Concrete also feels like an incomplete power because there is a lack of karma actions such as a karma streak. But I do love the boulder dash and melee. Okay, so let's talk about some characters. Fetch has a strong backstory that can make her a very interesting character, but she's not in the game much. One other thing that just seemed weird to me is I don't get why Delsin didn't just call Fetch and ask who the third escaped conduit was and what their power was. Well, it's Eugene. Eugene is a huge gamer stereotype, and I thought it was kind of offensive, especially in a video game, to have this kind of a character. Eugene isn't an interesting or strong character, and I'm glad we didn't see too much of him. Also, I think it's weird that you have to make the same choice with Eugene as you did with Fetch. It's just like they're reusing that same thing there. The whole Eugene section of the game kinda seemed pointless, like it was just something to fill in the time before you fought Augustine. I also didn't think that it was necessary to bring Hank back. The game had established earlier on that he can't be trusted, but then they tried to prove that once again. Going back a little, I thought that the scene where Reggie was pretending to be a conduit was pretty funny, but it didn't really fit with his character. I thought that his death wasn't necessary to be in the game. It was sad, but didn't seem to be meaningful for some reason. Kinda like they just threw it in there to have a plot twist at the end. Reggie's death is kind of comparable to Trish's death in Infamous 1. Both people are very close to the protagonist, are killed near the end of the game, and are killed by the main antagonist. The difference is that Trish's death felt meaningful and you learned that she was killed for a reason. When Augustine's motives behind the DUP are actually revealed in the end, it makes no sense why she killed Reggie. Also, it doesn't make sense for Reggie to say that he's proud of you before he dies if you're evil. Betty wasn't proud. I thought that the Hank karma choice was mostly well done. After Reggie's killed, it makes you want to kill Hank. I think that the only reason Hank's daughter was in there was to actually give you a reason not to kill him. I wanted to kill Hank even when I was good, which again proves how the karma system doesn't work well. Like I said before, I think that the story ends up being better when you're evil. When Delsin killed Betty, I was like, whoa, I did not expect the game to suddenly be that dark. It was unexpected, unlike the good ending, which is very predictable and boring. Also, I think that the scene was well acted and tense. If there is a second game, then I hope it follows the evil ending and Delsin is some sort of a damaged, more interesting character that could also make the story really interesting. Augustine's past was slightly interesting because she was activated by the Beast, but the rest of it wasn't surprising or interesting. So that's what I have to say about spoiler things. Remember, these opinions come from a huge Infamous fan. Soon I am also going to re-review the other Infamous games because I think that my reviews that I did of them were made when I was new to actually reviewing games, and I have better formed opinions now than I did then. So to all of you people who have actually played Infamous Second Son, and if you're here and you didn't play Infamous Second Son and you just don't care about spoilers for some reason, thank you for watching this video, and if Sucker Punch is still watching and didn't get mad at me for saying a few bad things about their game, then I really hope that you take some of the things I said into consideration for future games. And yeah, bye guys. Thanks for watching.